All right, so let's take a big breath in. Get some H2O in your brain. All right, another deep breath. How about this? Stand up. Shake your body out. Shake your body out. Do a little stretch. Stretch out. And we're going to stand and pray today. Emotion creates motion. Right? So as you get to moving, it helps you to feel that. Wake up the brain. All right. So, Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you now.
Thank you.
We take moments of gratitude today. We thank you for the things we take for granted. The sun, the moon, the stars, air, breath, thought, processing, encoding, decoding, long-term, short-term working memory. We thank you now because you are the master creator.
Yes, Jesus.
Hallelujah. That everything we have in our bodies is because you are great.
Hallelujah.
And so we bless you. We give you glory. We give you honor. We thank you for all of these wonderful students here this morning, this beautiful Wednesday morning. We thank you, oh God, for bringing them to this place. We thank you that our minds are equipped for learning. Hallelujah. Like a sponge, Father, you pour into us. And so as you speak, we absorb. And we thank you for that now today. Now bless those that are sick and shut in. Bless those that are having difficulty on today. Give them wisdom beyond their years. And we will be so very careful to give your name the praise, the glory, and the honor. And everyone says, Amen. 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 All right. Let's move. I have a few additional handouts for you. Hopefully it will make your learning just a little bit better. All right. So one handout explains explicit and implicit memories. How does it happen? Take one, pass it around. The other one is actually from, I believe, chapters something or another, where we went over the brain, different parts of the brain. This is where this integration happens, that everything that you've been learning now comes into fruition, where you can see how the brain processes memories. And so I've given you a photocopy of the brain, and for the astute scholar, on the back of this form, you can walk through and identify. You may have this in your notes already. It's going to help you on the test, so I'm giving it to you now. So do your due diligence. And so you can walk through and describe these parts. This become a part of the recall. Remember we talked about learning things, recalling things, conditioning it in our memory so that when I go to get it back, it comes back more readily. It's in that long-term memory. All right, so I'm trying to help you with your memory here. So help yourself and do it. All right? Let's move on. So we went over several different pieces of processing. Now we have quite a few slides that we're going to run through today. I would love to show a video, but it's about 9 minutes. And so if we get through what we need to get through in a sufficient amount of time, I'd like to show you this memory on living with an amazing memory. There's 2 videos, but I nixed one just because of time. Video activity, an amazing memory, which tells the tale of a guy who had a brain disease or disorder which caused him to develop some types of autism or artistic ways where he's phenomenal with numbers. And so it's amazing to watch. So if we have time, I hope to show you his story. All right, so any questions on anything we went over on Monday before I go forward? That's good. That means you guys know everything.
Okay.
Barely. All right, so get all my little handouts in order. And we are picking up at levels of processing. All right. Describe levels of processing and their effects on encoding. Do you remember what does encoding mean? What does it mean to encode memories? What do you think? Anybody?
And that to store them? Like
To store them, yeah. Yeah, to bring them in to store them. Yes, good job. All right, we process information at different levels. Everybody is different. And depth of processing affects our long-term retention. So there's such thing called shallow processing. Encodes on a very basic level, such as words, letters, sounds. Encoding, shallow processing, on the surface processing. Deep processing encodes semantically, based on the meaning of words. I begin to categorize based on the meaning of words. If new information is not meaningful or related to my experience, I have trouble retaining, recalling, processing it. We have especially good recall for information we can meaningfully relate to ourselves. If I draw some type of association to what you're talking about, then I recall that information more readily. All right. Describe the capacity. We're going into retaining information in the brain. We're going into memory storage. And if you're in your books, this is page 329 in your book. Describe the capacity and duration of long-term memories and discuss whether our long-term memories are processed and stored in specific locations. Now, we answered this testing effect question on Monday. So our capacity for storing information permanently is essentially unlimited. However, we do not store information as libraries store their books in discrete, precise locations. Instead, many parts of our brain interact as we encode, as we store and retrieve information that forms our memories. So past research shows a whole past is contained in the memory and is waiting to be relived or unveiled. Newer findings, flashbacks during surgery, are new creations of a stressed brain. Information is not stored in a single specific spot. Perception, language, emotions are more required brain networks. So studies have shown that when people have had major surgeries, they may have some flashbacks regarding that surgery. My husband years ago, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, had a major heart surgery. And this heart surgery was complex. It was supposed to be an in and out procedure, but it ended up being over the Thanksgiving, over the New Year holiday ordeal. And now if he goes into a surgery room, whether he's the one having surgery or not, there's a automatic recall response, anxiety kicks in because he remembers, his body remembers. So his mouth is like, what the heck is going on? It's a hospital. I've been here before. But his body goes through a shock because he remembers, the body keeps the score, remembers the trauma associated with the surgery. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. Describe the role of the frontal lobe and the hippocampus in memory processing. And so this is where you want to take notes on your little brain. All right. And so when you're looking at your picture of your brain, who knows where the hippocampus is? Who can identify where the hippocampus is? All right, let me show you if you can see this, my little image. So this is the form that you have here. And so the hippocampus is right above the cerebrum. So the cerebrum, I color-coded mine because that's how my brain works. So the cerebrum is here, the hippocampus is here, and it loops around just right in front. The amygdala is the little almond-shaped item right here that sits on the top of the hippocampus. And we'll focus just on those three during our study today. Does that make sense? Yeah, I can pass it around. Make sure it comes back to me. Pardon my notes. Of the brain?
Of both of them.
Both of them. Is there extra copies of the brain or? Do you have both sheets?
I think that is both.
Which one are you missing?
The brain one.
The brain one.
Well, this work RS is closed, so
Yeah.
I love it.
It's really cool.
Just the big brain.
Is that the, do you have what?
She had like a weird copy where it shows
Okay.
it's this sheet, but it's on the back of this sheet.
It's got a weird.
So, like it looks like this.
How did that happen? Okay. So you're missing one side of that. Let's see.
One side of the brain.
You have a one-sided brain. So sorry for your life. Thank you. All right, so. Did I see some extra? All right, so you'll have to work your one-sided brain, and maybe if there's an extra copy somewhere, somebody can make a copy before we leave here. And I will upload these to your copy link as a handout. All right, so let's see. Describe the role of the frontal lobes and the hippocampus in memory processing. Memory requires brain networks. The network that processes and stores your explicit memories includes your frontal lobe and the hippocampus, a limbic system structure. The hippocampus is not the permanent storehouse, but a loading dock that feeds new information to the cortex for permanent storage. This storage process is called memory consolidation. Sleep supports memory. What supports memory?
Sleep.
Sleep. Go to bed. Sleep supports memory. Consolidation. People with left hippocampus damage have trouble remembering verbal information. With right hippocampus damage, they have trouble remembering visual designs and locations. Describe the roles played. Well, let's see, before I go, it's dedicated to registers and temporary holds elements of explicit memories before moving them to the other regions of the brain. Neural storage of long-term memories is called memory consolidation. All right, implicit memory systems, the cerebrum and the basal ganglia. Implicit memory system, the cerebellum and basal ganglia plays important role in forming and storing memories created by classical conditioning. Anybody remember what classical conditioning was? A couple of classes ago we talked about operant and classical conditioning. Anyone remember what the classical conditioning was? I think it had something to do with a dog.
Yeah.
The initial reaction to a response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the dog knew he was going to get food when the light went on. He would start to salivate.
Yes, yes. And then who was the psychologist that?
Skinner. Oh, not Skinner.
He came later. Pavlov.
Pavlov.
Pavlov's dogs. Yes. All right. Implicit memories created by classical conditioning are processed in the cerebellum. So this is where that information is processed, in the very back of that brain. With a damaged cerebellum, people cannot develop certain conditioned reflexes, such as the eye blink response, the basal ganglia, deep brain structures involved in motor movement, facilitate formation of the procedural memories for skills. Procedural memories are like playing an instrument. I'm playing a piano and I'm working these chords and music and progressions into my memory through a process. Our implicit memory system, enabled by the cerebellum and the basal ganglia, helps explain why the reactions and skills we learn during infancy reach far into our future. Yet, as adults, our conscious memory of our first 3 years is blank, an experience called infantile amnesia. Conscious memory of the first 3 years is blank. Command of language and well-developed hippocampus is needed. All right, review of key memory structures of the brain. All right, you have this handout. This gives you some of the, where this frontal lobe, basal ganglia, amygdala, almond-shaped portion there, the cerebellum, hippocampus. Frontal lobe and the hippocampus house the explicit memory formation. Cerebellum and basal ganglia, implicit memory formation. The amygdala manages the emotions related to memory formation. All right. Discuss how emotions affect our memory processing. The naturally stimulating hormones that we produce when excited or stressed make more glucose energy available to fuel brain activity, signaling the brain that something important has happened. The amygdala, two emotion process, clusters in the brain's limbic system. It initiates a memory trace in the frontal lobes and basal ganglia and boosts activity in the brain's memory forming areas. These emotion-triggered hormones changes help explain our flash bulb memories of surprising, those interjecting memories of significant events. Emotionless events mean weaker memories. And so if I'm having an experience and my emotions are in a fight, flight, or freeze, I'm more than apt going to remember what happened more readily than having an event where my emotions were not attached to them. So events that are like highly joyful. Oh, I laughed till I cried tears. That was so funny. Or an insult. An emotion is attached to the words that were spoken to you. Traumatic memories. There's an emotional response attached to those memories. Or maybe getting a bad review. You turn in the paper and the professor said, oh, this is the worst paper I ever read in my whole college career. You remember those words, right? And so an emotion is attached to it. These memories stick because it has aroused an emotion. And so you've got different areas of the brain operating in sequence, which makes that memory now become a long-term memory. Explain how changes at the synapse level affect our memory processing. The search for the physical basis of memory is now focused on the synapses and their neurotransmitters and the long-term potentiation of brain circuits. A memory slug. The much-studied California sea slug. It's an ugly thing. Aplasia has increased our understanding of the neural basis of learning. So in response to increased activity in the neural pathway, neural interconnections form or strengthen. Studies of the sea slug, Aplasia, indicate that when learning occurs, the slug releases more of the neurotransmitter serotonin at certain synapses, and these synapses become more efficient at transmitting signals. In experiments rapidly stimulating certain memory circuits, connections has increased their sensitivity for weeks to come. So this LTP, long-term potentiation, appears to be a neural basis for learning and remembering associations. Drugs that block this LTP interfere with learning. Scientists are developing and testing drugs that enhance long-term memory. One approach is to develop drugs that enhance the production of protein. Another is to develop drugs that boost glutamate. All right. LTP increases synapse firing. Brain will not erase the memories, believed to be a neural basis for learning. Candle and Watts pinpointed changes in sea slug's neural connection with learning, more serotonin release, and cell efficiency increase. All right. All right, so we're going to move to memory retrieval. Electron microscope image shows just one receptor site, reaching toward a sending neuron before long-term potentiation. Image shows that after LTP, the receptor site has doubled. This means that the receiving neuron has increased the sensitivity for detecting the presence of the neurotransmitter molecules that may be released by the sending neuron. And so if you remember our example where we did the chocolate Hershey Kisses and we threw some information over here, and when they met a threshold, they threw it over here to the synapse gap, and synapse gap threw it over here to the terminal branches, so that it's having that, bringing in information, encoding, bringing it in, understanding it until it becomes a part of our memory and a part of our behaviors. All right. Memory retrieval cues. Priming, context-dependent memory, state-dependent memory, serial position effect. All right, describe how external cues, internal emotions, and order of appearance influence memory retrieval. Memories are held in storage by a web of associations. How do we store memory? A web of associations, yeah. And so our experience creates some type of association, and that association helps us to store memory. Retrieval cues enable you to follow the path to memory. For example, to retrieve a specific memory, we need to identify one of the strands that lead us to it, a process called priming. Activating retrieval cues within our web association aids memory. Such activation may occur without our awareness and may also influence behavior. Putting yourself back in the context where you experience something can prime your memory retrieval. By contrast, experiencing something outside the usual setting can be confusing. The encoding specificity principle helps us to understand how cues specific to an event or person will most effectively trigger that memory. Closely related to the context-dependent memory is the state-dependent memory. The tendency to recall information best in the same state. If I'm happy, that memory floods me. If I'm sad, that memory floods me. In the same state as when the information was learned. Memories are somewhat mood congruent. While in a good or bad mood, we often retrieve memories consistent with that mood. For example, research suggests that currently depressed people have recalled their parents as rejecting, punitive, guilt-promoting, whereas formerly depressed people's recollections more closely resemble the more positive descriptions given by those who have never suffered depression. Moods also prime us to interpret others' behavior in ways consistent with our emotions. There's a quote that says, "We see the world as we are." And so if you're experiencing something that's relative to me, I may associate that you're going through the same thing that I went through. But your experience could be vastly different. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. After memory retrieval, quirk is the serial position effect. Let me just catch us up. Memory retrieval, memories held in storage by web associations. Retrieval cues, priming. Retrieval cues, priming awakens association. After seeing and hearing a rabbit, we later more likely to spell the spoken word as hare. Seeing or hear the word rabbit activates concept, prime spelling the word hare. All right, associations unconsciously activate related associations. This process is called priming. So let's see, I have a brief story. Context-dependent memory, encoding specificity principle. Context-dependent memory involves improved recall of specific information when the context present at encoding and retrieval are the same. Encoding I can't say that word today. Specificity principle suggests cues and context specific to a particular memory will be most effective in helping recall. All right, here's some definitions that I just went over. So just last night, this just hit me about 5 o'clock this morning. And so just last night, I was looking for some documents that I did back in August, and I needed them to finish my dissertation, so I'm panicking because if I don't find them, that means I have to do the work over, and I don't want to do the work over because that's suffering for me. So I was stressing about 9 o'clock last night, looking through all of my documents, and I have to clean up to find stuff. And so I'm looking through stuff to find stuff and didn't find it all night long. I said, "Did you find it?" No, I didn't find it, so I need to start finding time in my schedule to redo it. And so I was kind of sad about having to go back and do stuff I already did. And so I was thinking, all right, now where was I at when I did this particular research? Okay. I was sitting in a Disneyland resort. That didn't help me because I can't go back to Disneyland to reenact where I was, what was happening. I was sitting in a Disneyland resort working on a research paper. Could have been talking to Mickey, but whatever. All right, so I go back and I'm sitting here, I'm doing this, and this is the paper I had here, and that's the paper I had there. Where are those papers months later? Who the heck knows? Life happens, right? And so I finally, call it a day, go to bed, and I wake up 5 o'clock this morning. I'm late, actually 4:30, I'm thinking out of bed at 5 o'clock. And I wake up and I say, okay, so let's just reckon it as dead and let's begin the process again. And so I stopped stressing about finding it and just said, okay, we're just going to have to do it. So it's 5 o'clock, you got 2 good hours to sit down and get back into that headspace. And when I sat at my desk and began to get back into that headspace, just a light bulb popped on and said, you were working on your pre-drafts of this dissertation. And because you had no additional paper at the Disneyland Resort, all your notes are taken on the back of that whole dissertation. So I was like, whoa, light bulb. And so I went right back to that paperwork, and lo and behold, everything that I spent all night stressing over was right on the back of the document that I had picked up several times and moved. Right? But that's how the brain processes. Our emotions are attached to some certain outcome. And as long as I'm stressing, my brain won't let me have the information that's sitting right there in front of me. Have anybody ever had that happen to you?
Every day.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding. And the biggest one is anytime I have to do something that requires like moving something for a sound, because
Yes.
stuff, I always forget where I put like the one little cable, and then I walk back and forth all day.
Yes, over the wire, back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sitting right by your coffee cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, done that. And so our brain is phenomenal. All right, so these are definitions here. I've already went through them, so I'm not going to read the slide to you. We're going to move on, and we're doing pretty good here. All right, so let's see. Forgetting and the two-tracked mind. All right, explain why we forget. The capacity to forget useless or out-of-date information is helpful. It really is. Because of this inability to forget, the Russian memory whiz, known as S, found it more difficult than others to think abstractly, to generalize, to organize, to evaluate. Without an ability to forget, we would be overwhelmed by out-of-date and irrelevant information. There are two types of forgetting. The anterograde, I'm saying that right? What slide am I on here? Let's skip ahead. All right, forgetting has several causes: encoding failure, storage decay, retrieval failure, interference. Forgetting, encoding, storage decay, encoding age, encoding lag is linked to age-related memory. Attention, failure to notice or encode contributes to memory failure. Storage decay, course of forgetting is initially rapid and then levels off with time. Physical changes in the brain occur when memory forms. All right, so we'll get to where I am, so just take notes until I figure out where you're supposed to be. All right, there's two types of forgetting, and I'll write it up here. So when you get there, you'll know it. All right, there is an amnesia, retrograde amnesia. All right. So those are the words you're looking for in your slides. They're there somewhere, I'm sure. All right. Anterograde amnesia involves the ability to form new memories, the inability to form new memories. Whereas retrograde amnesia is the inability to recall the past. One example of forgetting is that we fail to encode information for entry into our memory system. Without effortful processing, we talked about this on Monday, much of what we sense we never notice or process. Age can affect encoding efficiently. However, our selective attention is a major factor. You got to pay attention to the details. For example, most people in the United States have looked at thousands of pennies. However, when tested on specific features, they have difficulty recognizing the real thing. Now, memories may fade after storage. For his research on learning and retention, Ibn Haas found that forgetting occurs rapidly at first, then it levels off. The principle became known as the forgetful curve. Storage decay may reflect a gradual fading of the physical memory trace. Another possible explanation is that we simply can't retrieve the information. Retrieval failure can occur if we have too few cues to summon information for long-term memory. It may also happen when old and new information compete for retrieval. In proactive interference, reasons for failure, forgetting. In proactive interference, something we learned in the past interferes with our ability to recall something we have recently learned. In reactive interference, something we have recently learned interferes with something we learned in the past. With his concepts of repression, Sigmund Freud proposed that our memories are self-censoring. To protect our self-concept and to minimize anxiety, we block. We may block from consciously painful memories. We just block them off. In Freud's view, this motivated forgetting submerges memories, but leaves them available for later retrieval under the right conditions. We see a lot of this with PTSD. As kids, you may block information, you may block occurrences, and as your brain feels safer, begins to heal, as a young adult or older adult, you may begin to remember pieces, still frames, snapshots of information that doesn't make sense in your current condition because it's something that happened in earlier childhood. All right. Retroactive interference, something we have recently learned interferes with something we learned in the past. All right. With his concept of repression, Sigmund Freud proposed that our memories are self-censoring. I just read that. In Freud's view, this motivating forgetting submerges memories but leaves them available for the later retrieval under right conditions. Increasing numbers of memory researchers think repression rarely, if ever, occurs. More typically, we have trouble forgetting traumatic experiences. All right, so I am going to, when do we forget? Forgetting can occur at any memory stage. Sensory memory, working stage memory, long-term memory retrieval. At any stage, we may forget information and either have to go relearn it in order to recall it if it is important. Misinformation and imagination effects. Okay. This misinformation, how many slides I got here? Misinformation effect occurs when memory has been corrupted by misleading information. Your brain, I believe Jonathan was the one that mentioned this on Monday, your brain can recall information that never really occurred. It just fabricates or makes up things. Imagination effect occurs when repeatedly imagining fake actions and events can create false memories. Memory construction errors. Source amnesia, misattribution involves faulty memories for how, when, and where information was learned or imagined. If we're dealing with people who have traumatic memories, we often have them do a timeline and verify that timeline with other people so to make sure that the memory is actually true. Deja vu is sense that I'm experienced this before. So just cues that from current situation may unconsciously trigger a retrieval of earlier experiences. All right, discerning true and false memories. False memories feel like real memories and can be persistent, but are usually limited to the gist of the event. False memories are often a result of faulty eyewitness testimonies. All right, children eyewitness recalls. Researchers studied the effect of suggested interviewing techniques. 58% of the preschoolers produce false stories. Children often accurately recall events and actors. The neutral person, the non-leading questions. It is possible to lead somebody into believing something by the questioning that you use. All right, repressed and constructed memories. All right, we'll just pick up these last 3 slides. I want to save a few minutes for this video. All right, so this video is an amazing memory.
Is it about that children?
It's about the guy that had the autism.
27-year-old math and memory wizard.
I was born November 8, 1931.
As a prime number, 1931. And you were born on a Sunday. And this year your birthday will be on a Wednesday. And you'll be 75.
Precisely.
It's estimated there are only 50 true savants living in the world today, and yet none are like Daniel. He is articulate, self-sufficient, blessed with all of the spectacular ability of a savant, but with very little of the disability. Take his math skills.
Okay, so 31 by 31 by 31 by 31.
Yeah. It is 923,521.
I dare say you're right. Or 17 times 17 times 17 times 17.
83,521.
And it's not just calculating. His gift of memory is stunning. Briefly show him a long numerical sequence, and he'll recite it right back to you.
914, 1934, 217, 1844, 322381.
Of course.
And he can do it backwards to boot.
1832334481711.
That feat is just a warm-up for Daniel Tammet. He first made headlines at Oxford when he publicly recited the endless sequence of numbers embodied by the Greek letter pi. Pi, the numbers we use to calculate the dimensions of a circle. It's usually rounded off to 3.14, but its numbers actually go on to infinity. Daniel studied the sequence, 1,000 numbers to a page.
I would sit and I would gorge on them, and I would just absorb hundreds and hundreds at a time.
It took him several weeks to prepare, and then Daniel headed to Oxford, where, with number crunchers checking every digit,
1415.
he opened the floodgates of his extraordinary memory.
830468969702259106795456815.
You were able to recite in the proper order. How many?
22,514. 4960.
It took him over 5 hours.
94726.
He did it without a single mistake.
399520614196. 3587. Finished. Yeah.
Scientists say a memory feat like this is truly extraordinary. Dr. V.S. Ramachandran and his team at the California Center for Brain Study tested Daniel extensively after his pi achievement.
Once you met him, what did you make of him? I was surprised at how articulate and intelligent he was, and was able to interact socially and introspect on his own abilities.
And while that introspection is extremely rare among savants, Daniel's ability to describe how his mind works could be invaluable to scientists studying the brain, our least understood organ.
Even how you and I do. 17 minus 9 is a big mystery. You know, how are these little wisps of jelly in your brain doing that computation? We don't know that.
It may seem to defy logic, but Ramachandran believes that a savant's genius could actually result from brain injury.
One possibility is that many other parts of the brain are functioning abnormally or subnormally. And this allows the patient to allocate all his attentional resources to the one remaining part. And there's a lot of clinical evidence for this. Some patients have a stroke, and suddenly their artistic skills improve.
That theory fits well with Daniel. At the age of 4, he suffered a massive epileptic seizure. He believes that seizure contributed to his condition. Numbers were no longer simply numbers. He developed a rare crossing of the senses known as synesthesia.
I see numbers in my head as colors and shapes and textures, so when I see a long sequence, the sequence forms landscapes in my mind. Every number up to 10,000 I can visualize in this way, has its own color, has its own shape, has its own texture.
For example, this is how Daniel says he sees pi. And when he does those instant computations, he's not calculating, but says the answer simply appears to him as a landscape of colorful shapes.
the shapes aren't static. They're full of colour, they're full of texture. In a sense, they're full of life.
Are they beautiful?
Not all of them. Some of them are ugly. 289 is an ugly number. I don't like it very much. Whereas 333, for example, is beautiful to me. It's round, it's chubby. It's chubby.
He was constantly counting things. I think what first attracted him to books was the actual numbers on each page. And he just loved counting.
Do you think there is a connection between his epilepsy and his talent?
He was always different from when he was really a few weeks old. I noticed he was different. So I'm not sure that it's entirely that, but I think it might have escalated it.
That it opened up that part of the brain?
Yes, that's what I believe, yes.
Daniel was also diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a mild form of autism. It made for a painful childhood.
I would flap my hands sometimes when I was excited, or pull at my fingers and pull at my lips. And of course the children saw these things and would repeat them back to me and tease me about them. I would put my fingers in my ears and count very quickly in powers of 2, 2, 4, 8, 16, 52, 64.
Numbers were in a sense from the real world, yes?
Yes, numbers were my friends and they never changed. So they were reliable. I could trust them.
And yet, Daniel did not retreat fully into that mysterious prison of autism as many savants do. He believes his large family may have actually forced him to adapt.
Because my parents, having 9 children, had so much to do, so much to cope with, I realized I had to do for myself.
He now runs his own online educational business. He and his partner Neil try to keep a low profile, despite his growing fame. The limits of his autism are always there.
I find it difficult to walk in the street sometimes if there are lots of people around me. If there's lots of noise, I put my fingers in my ears to block it out.
That anxiety keeps him close to home. He can't drive and rarely goes shopping, and finds the beach a difficult place because of his compulsion to count the grains of sand. And it manifests itself in other ways, like making a very precise measurement of his cereal each morning. It must be exactly 45 grams of porridge, no more, no less.
That's perfect.
Do you think that Daniel, in a certain way, represents a real pathway to further understanding the brain?
I think one could say that time and again in science, something that looks like a curiosity initially often leads to a completely new direction of research. Sometimes they provide the golden key. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's just mumbo jumbo. But that may well be true with savants.
Daniel continues to volunteer for scientists who want to understand his amazing brain. But he's reluctant to become what he calls a performing SEAL, and has refused most offers to cash in on his remarkable skills.
People all the time asking me to choose numbers for the lottery or to invent a time machine or to come up with some great discovery, but my abilities are not those that mean that I can do everything.
But he has written a book about his experiences entitled Born on a Blue Day. He also does motivational speeches for parents of autistic children. Yet one more gift of his remarkable brain.
Thanks.
Thank you.
But at the end of the day, genius or not, that brain does work a little differently.
1 hour after we leave today, and I will not remember what you look like, and I will find it difficult to recognize you. If I see you again, I will remember your handkerchief, and I will remember you have 4 buttons on your sleeve, and I remember the type of tie you're wearing. It's the details I remember.
And it's the details that make us all so different. One man may see numbers as a tedious necessity of modern life. Another sees them as the essence of life.
Pi is one of the most beautiful things in all of the world. And if I can share that joy in numbers, if I can share that in some small measure with the world, through my writing and through my speaking, then I feel that I will have done something useful.
All right, there you go. I will see you on Friday.
Yeah. This is an extra paper.
Oh.